Real Vision are, I think, and actually I know, and beyond this, are the leading finance intelligence media brand, I think, in the world at the moment. They have revolutionized how finance brands engage with content. You have to think back to pre-pandemic when people weren't creating content online. They weren't doing videos, they weren't doing interviews. Real Vision were doing this before it was fashionable, and the pandemic has completely flipped in its head. Real Vision now have gone on to launch some very successful endeavors in the crypto space. They are also developing some really exciting, pioneering new experiences based in Web3 as well. So it's an absolute honor and privilege to welcome co-founder of Real Vision and head of their creative studios, Damien Horner, back to Social Media Finance. He is an institution at this event. Welcome, Damien.
James, I feel so bad because I know you need a coffee, and I know a coffee is going to be way more interesting than me for right now in this moment that you're in. If you want to go and grab one, I'm happy,
Well, I can get actually now. Maybe if I just grab a. I've actually got. Is there that flask?
Is there no one looking after you there? He's going to run over with.
There's someone looking after me. Yeah, it's going to rally to me with a. Oh,
nice.
I've got one here. My assistant has kindly given me a nice coffee. Yes,
that's whiskey
and you understand.
Jar. Very good.
Show business. Thank you so much, Damien. And again, obviously, I really, really excited to talk to you because so much has happened over the last year, and I'm aware there was, this conversation might veer off away from the questions I sent over, but I just wanted to kind of start from the top, really, because you've been a consistent speaker at our events across the years and will continue to be so, because I think you are you really are the tip of the spear when it comes to creativity. And Ben from LinkedIn was saying actually about this kind of creativity, whether it's a trough or whether something's happened in the pandemic, which has kind of been a blessing, but also there's been some unexpected outcomes where creativity is kind of changing or there is a lack of creativity. So I'm wondering, what's the high level thoughts from you as a leader of Real Vision, as a leader of the creative vision of the company? Where are we now, and what does the future look like from a high level?
Let's start with a big question. Okay, thank you. I think where we are now is the world is catching up with the way social media is changing the face of communication, brand communication per se. I'm not just talking about finance, I'm talking across the planet. I think brands have been very slow to recognize this shift. So if you look at the way brands used to communicate, they would produce a TV commercial or they would produce a poster, a billboard, and then push that out onto their audience, and it was a monologue. Brands, as you've discussed all day, and you guys, this is the preeminent event for any kind of discussion about social communication within finance, is social communication has completely changed the way consumers engage with brands, particularly in finance. They don't just sit back and listen anymore. They talk back. They ask questions. So we've moved from a monologue to a conversation. So that's great. And, lots of people are starting to enter into that conversation. You've had some great speakers talking about that. But it becomes very difficult for a lot of people within the finance industry of all sectors, because the finance industry has always worked to the same model. It's been the kind of the Doric columns, the big bank, the heritage and the institution, and these people are experts. These analysts know more than anybody else. We're the experts. We know what's happening. We're the gurus, and we will share our information with you, and you invest in us accordingly. Now, that model is great when no one answers back, but a couple of things have happened recently. So one is social media has changed the game. So you can't just pontificate and be an authority and chuck out your pearls of wisdom, because people want to engage with it. They want to answer back. They question it. They say, well, hang on, I read this somewhere else, or I saw that somewhere else. And they have multiple streams of information to source. So they can say, but I read this over here, or I saw that over there. So there's a lot more challenge. There are a lot more challenges to that authority guru status that banks have always relied on. So that's one massive factor. The other massive factor is that the markets have completely changed. I mean, right now, we're heading for a recession. There's a crypto winter. Everybody is suffering in one way or another. We're still feeling the fallout of COVID, and we've got the war in Ukraine. What that means is this is another challenge to the way finance companies work, which is they can't be the guru and the authority because they don't know what's going to happen. They have no idea. They can kind of look at it based on previous models, but the way the banking industry has worked over the last 2-3 years is one, there are unseen events, black swan events like COVID or the Ukraine war, which are changing everything, make things unpredictable. There are a new generation of investors, millennials, the Robin Hood audiences, who are not following trends based on history. They're just based on social media and what's going on Twitter. So GameStop was a perfect example of how, and they're trying to do it on Celsius now, how the markets are being manipulated by just people coming together, not by the rules of the market. And the third factor is crypto. Crypto and blockchain has completely distorted how banking works. If you pile on top, central banks actually have more power than they've ever had before. Where you end up is it's incredibly hard for financial institutions to communicate in the way they have done in the past, and they literally do not know what to do. They are flailing around, lost, posting inane content on social media channels or LinkedIn or whatever it might be, trying to make friends. They are trying to create videos, but they're creating videos that feel like a written document that's just been turned into a video. So I think the lack of creativity is because the rules have changed and there hasn't been enough thought put into how do we change our communication strategy. The most common response has been, let's hire a social media person or let's make some videos for LinkedIn. And there's not a lot of deep strategic thought about communication models as a result.
Yeah, and I think the proof's in the pudding. Like, you Real Vision and all the productions you and the team have made are just, but it's where the zeitgeist go to. And I think one of the things which stuck with me from what you said a few years ago was it's okay to not have the answers and actually expose yourself and actually be comfortable with uncertainty rather than trying to kind of like pretend like, yes, everything's fine, here's the answer. And that does expose, I suppose, a degree of vulnerability to when you have that assumption of we don't actually know. And we might not actually be right all the time, but you know what? No one is. And if they were right all the time, then there wouldn't be a free market. So how do you
This is a really important point, James. And I'll give you a very real example. So we have 8 years of data, so we see what people are watching on our channel, what they're interested in, how they engage or don't. And obviously we use that to perfect the content for ourselves and for clients we work with. There was something that happened about 6 weeks ago. In fact, probably a bit longer, probably about 8-9 weeks ago, where my co-founder, Raul, did a video on Real Vision, and he said, I just don't know what's happening. I just don't know where we're going. I can't give you much help right now because there are so many factors at play here, from the Fed to the Ukraine to COVID distribution issues through to crypto winter. There's a lot going on, and I honestly don't know what's going to happen next. So what I'm going to do is, rather than try and tell you the answer, I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking now, and I'm going to come back in a couple of days' time and tell you how that's changed. And what I'm thinking now might be completely wrong in 2 days' time, but I want to take you on my thinking journey so you understand where my head is at. At the same time, I had a conversation with a very big global bank who wanted to put out a piece where they were going to predict, I can't even remember what it was, interest rates and inflation rates or whatever it would be in the next 3 to 6 months, 9 months, I think it might have been. Anyway, the point is they didn't know. They were just guessing. They they felt enormous pressure to say something so they looked like they knew what they were talking about and they were the gurus to reassure their clients. And yet when you do research with clients like we do a lot, the clients, the ordinary investors say, look, we know that you can't predict what's going to happen. We know that this is a shit show and nobody really knows what's going to happen next. So those people that try to play the guru, we absolutely don't trust. The people who say, like Raoul, my co-founder, said, look, I don't know, but I'm going to take you on my journey. They're the people we want to follow. They're the people we trust. Those are the people who are being authentic in this time. And so it goes back to what I was saying before about this changing model. But I think the biggest lesson that everybody watching this has to take out right now is this downturn has touched everybody. Crypto, traditional, everybody. It is the best time ever for content producers. You will not get many more times as good as this for creating content because, and we see this with all our data, when times are good, people think they're amazing at finance. They think they're gods. They think, God, I can make money on the markets. It's easy. Or Bitcoin, I just buy something, it goes up. And as soon as there's a downturn, like there is now, people panic and they realize they don't understand enough and they are desperate for information. The difference is they don't want to be sold to. What they want is they want learning. They want education. Your selling can come later, but right now, if there's one thing audiences want, it's education and analysis. What you should be doing is you should be creating content that is longer in form because we're not trying to sell. You're trying to help and educate. People need hand-holding. They need things explaining. They don't want news. You can get news everywhere. What they want is what does that news mean and what are the implications of it? So that kind of deep analysis combined with education, that is the content game right now. That is what everybody should be focused on.
And that really, from what I'm trying to get from you, is in many ways what you're saying is that authority, the idea of authority traditionally is that brand builds authority by issuing statements about the future, and then the authority is built. Well, that person goes, that person sounds like no one's talking about. That's the statement, and I am the person you should listen to because I'm the authority, and I build my authority by issuing these big predictions about the future. That's kind of how traditionally everyone views. Like, but what you're saying is, it's you can build authority by I suppose facing the fact head on that there is uncertainty and almost articulating your thoughts and processes and analysis as to how you come to decisions, and people value the mechanics of how you're thinking, if not more than trying to lead them up the wrong path by saying, here's the answers. So you're saying in many ways it's re-engineering what content is to actually saying, well, the content, the magic is how you are deducing all this information. Talk about that. And don't, I suppose, infantize your audience.
When your math teacher says, show me the workings out. I don't just want the answer, show me the workings out. It's a bit like that. I mean, if you're thinking about content in this moment in time, this is probably for the next 12 to 18 months, you want to be empathetic. You want to understand the situations that your audience are in. Don't start with yourself. Don't start with what you want to say. Understand what fears, worries, panics, hopes that your audience have. Start there and use that as your anchor or your start point for your communication. Education analysis, as I've just said, is super important. Recognize that it's a conversation, super important. That your authority does not come from having the answers like in the old days. Your authority will come from educating, hand-holding, and assisting your audience at a time when they're feeling very, very vulnerable. And what you do now is what will carry you through, perhaps for a whole generation. You know, what you're doing now with millennials, which is the biggest workforce on the planet, and yet the finance industry is still obsessed with baby boomers. But millennials, if you can help millennials now, you will probably have those millennials until they are the baby boomers. This is a very important moment in time for the finance industry to to get it right.
I think that's a really, really profound shift because so many, and I know you've been talking about this for a while, but so many, for example, if I'm like a wealth management or like I am the CFO or I'm the founder, I traditionally, I know that there will be a degree of insecurity, me going up and saying, you know what, I don't actually know all the answers.
Honestly, James, I can't see many banks or asset wealth managers doing it. Very, very few would have the balls to do it, and very few would be allowed to do it because somebody else who doesn't understand the power of communication and the way audiences have changed will let them do it. So very few will actually be able to follow through. So then they've got to think, okay, if I can't be as honest as I could or should be, what else can I do? And probably the next level down is education analysis. Don't worry about news, as I've said. Hand-holding. Play the long game. Don't try and sell stuff. Try and help people because that's how you build trust. And if I trust you, then I want to buy from you and I'll come to you. Be empathetic, as I've said. And recognize that your audience is not just the boomers. Your audience is now consuming content on multiple channels. They're coming at it at very different life stages. They're going through enormous change, whoever they are right now when it comes to their finances, or at least they're thinking about change. And so you've really got to be agile in the way you communicate.
Real Vision has built, you and obviously your team have built Real Vision to become almost a brand which is a rebellious brand against the institutions you speak about. So, this whole idea of finance, it's kind of this old boys club, and it's big skyscrapers. You always say big skyscrapers, the headshot of someone in the suit. That's kind of been what Real Vision built on, and I think it's brilliant. If you're in a more traditional like bank who obviously doesn't have the luxury of being part of the rebellion, in many ways you signify the institutions. Many of these old brands are the very idea of what millennials, where the kind of the revolution is focused on. How do you kind of engineer that? Because if I am a traditional bank, I have 100 years of history. I can't say that the financial system needs change and communication. Is there a way? How do you kind of balance that message when you are not, traditional? When you are
ironically, I run at Real Vision a team where we work specifically with outside organizations. So content strategies for UBS, for Morgan Stanley, JP Morgan in the States, ARK Invest. We've done projects with all of these and many, many others, where each of those organizations has its own problems, its own audience, its own culture, its own way of doing things. And what we do is we sit down with them and say, okay, how can we get your message to market in a way that you feel comfortable with, but that audiences beyond just your clients, although actually we also talk to existing clients as well, how do we get them to engage more deeply with you? And very often it's that, I would say the biggest kind of shift is that many financial institutions are very internally focused. They have systems that are all about creating a research report and then going and selling that data or that fund to an audience. So it starts very internally and then goes out to the consumer. And a lot of what we do is say, okay, our team's got psychologists and marketing people and ex-Goldman people, etc. Is about, where are the audience at right now? What do they need to know? How can we pivot from that to tell your story or your message? And most of all, as has been mentioned several times, it's storytelling. It's not charts, it's not numbers, it's a story. And everybody knows that the best salespeople in finance are the best storytellers. Because finance is all storytelling. All we are doing is trying to tell a story of what we think is going to happen over the next 6, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. None of us know. We can look back and get data, but everybody is telling a story about what they think will happen next.
And I suppose that leads on to my question around you mentioned obviously you're dealing with a lot of big part of the Real Vision, minus being obviously your own media kind of production for finance. You do actually help brands, and you really give them strategic advice and production, the full cycle creative support. What you've touched on the advice you get, you touched slightly on the advice you give in this conditions. Could you expand, slightly on the conversations you're having, the concerns your clients have about not just now, but briefly into the future, and what advice you're giving them to, I suppose, appease those concerns that they're having?
I think that there's a lot of focus on news, telling news stories. What's happened next? What's happened to the inflation rate, to the interest rates, etc. There's a lot of focus on news. But at the end of the day, what banks and most financial institutions are about selling. Okay, and news will not sell products. There are two things that will get your audience or a new audience to buy your product within finance. There's only two. The first one is analysis. What just happened? What does that mean? What does that mean for me? That by taking something that's happened in the news and talking about what we call at Real Vision the knock-on effect, that will get people to engage with you. And once they understand what the news means, they're much more likely to look at their portfolio or their investments and say, crikey, okay, now I understand this or what it might mean, I'm going to jiggle my portfolio around, or I'm going to move my investments into that, or I'm going to spend more money on that, or I'm going to go cash, or whatever it might be. So analysis is incredibly important in driving action, because once they understand, then they know what to do next. That's one thing. And there's not enough analysis. There's a lot of hot air. There's a lot of news. There's not a lot of proper analysis that's targeted at the audience. The second thing that will drive audience change and drive sales is education, which is I'm never going to invest in rare earth metals until someone explains to me what they are, why they're valuable, and what's happening in that market. Because nobody invests in stuff they don't understand. You just don't do it. So if somebody educates me about rare earth metals, helps me understand how that market works, then I am much more likely to say, do you know what? I'm just going to allocate a little bit of money into that fund. So those are the two drivers for change in your portfolio or investments. It's analysis and it's education. Everything else is just sales. What's interesting is most institutions find it kind of awkward to deliver analysis or education, because there's somebody saying, yeah, but you're not telling them about my product. You're not selling. And you say, yeah, I get that. I get the pressure. But until you do this first bit, no one wants to know about your product or your fund. Nobody's going to be confident enough, particularly in this market, to make any kind of change or investment. So if there's one tip, that tip about those two strands of communication is probably the most powerful.
Absolutely agree. And along that strain, I think it'd be really interesting to now move on to getting your perspective on the future. And I think Real Vision, for the last, really 2 years, I think, if not longer, Real Vision as a company, as a culture, have been banging the drum about the change, the revolution which is happening in the world of Web3 and everything associated with Web3, cryptocurrencies and metaverse. And I know, Real Vision have been like a vanguard, been banging the drum about this. Could we spend some time talking about this? Because, I think it's super exciting for social media, the evolution of social media. There's so much to unpack. I'm wondering kind of what your perspective is on this change and how it's going to impact creativity and finance and beyond.
So first of all, it's happening. Okay, it's not like this may or may not happen. It's happening. So the question now is for anyone out there is, at what point do I get on this train? And some people will get on a bit too early, and they might spend too much money and too much time on it to no real immediate effect. And some people will get on far too late and be catching up. And some people are going to miss it altogether. But the point is, it's happening. So then it's a question of, okay, if it's happening, how do we engage with it and how do we maximize its potential for my audience or my brand? Right now, it's at that stage where there's more huff and puff about it than real delivery. So for a lot of brands, you mentioned JP Morgan earlier, the guy from JP Morgan, I think it's important for them to be in the space. Let's just focus on the metaverse. It's important to be in the space, mainly to be seen to be in the space.
Yeah.
Just to be seen. So the fact that guy said, you were saying he's in Decentraland, I thought, wow, okay, kudos. I wouldn't have expected JP Morgan to be in Decentraland. So that makes me think about JP Morgan in a slightly different way. So it makes a brand statement at this moment in time. Will it deliver for them more customers? Will it drive more sales? Will they be making more money? Probably not now. But there's a great story about a tractor company in the UK, John Deere tractors. They're kind of green and yellow tractors in the UK. And in the 70s, I think it was, they produced some sit-on plastic ride-on tractors for kids. And God knows why they did it. They got absolutely slaughtered internally for wasting marketing money on building these toys that had nothing to do, no impact at all on tractor sales, because they just had these kids driving around in John Deere's. What's fascinating is 20 to 35 years later, John Deere sales rocketed. And one of the reasons all the research suggests was that loads of farmers just had this deep emotional attachment with John Deere.
Wow.
They rode them when they were kids. So I love that kind of sleeper marketing. And I think the metaverse is at the moment, right now, is probably like that, where it's not going to deliver right now, but to be seen to be doing it will deliver now, and it will pay back in the long term because you will build a different kind of relationship with a different kind of audience than the one you're normally able to connect with. So I think that's one thing about the metaverse. Web3 is going to fundamentally change content, but it's also going to change the way we engage with brands. And the reason is very simple, actually, which is there are going to be fewer gatekeepers. There are going to be fewer, the Googles of the world, the Facebooks of the world will be less forced through their channels. And it's going to be as though the internet is more a la carte than a set menu. At the moment, the internet's a bit of a set menu. Web3 makes it a la carte. And I will be able to mix and match and create my own versions of the brands I engage with. So Real Vision, for example, we're heavily into our Web3 development. And what it will mean is that at the moment, you go on our site, you watch the videos that we've released today, and that's experience. And of course, you can go around it and watch other things. But what will happen in the future is my version of Real Vision in Web3 will be very different to your version and very different to her version. We will all engage with it and construct it in different ways. We will mix and match in a way that is different to the way you do it and the way that's different that they do it. So brands are going to face a lot of disruption, a bit of schizophrenia, they're going to lose a lot of coherency because people will be engaging in very different ways. Two things that need to happen. One, as a brand, you need to earn your place in that a la carte set of choices. You need to be creating content and engaging with audiences in a way that they think, oh, I've got to have those guys in my mix. I've got to have them because I really get something from them. So that means you've got to be thinking now about earning your place then. You're laying the foundations now. And as I said earlier, in a recession or a crisis, it's a great time to build trust, to deliver authenticity, and to get loyalty. So now, one of the things you should be thinking about is I'm building relationships that are going to carry me through the incoherency of Web3. I want to be the brand that they look to and say, I trusted those guys. I like those guys. They get it. They were on it. I'm going to carry them through with me. Whereas those people were just doing what everyone else was doing. You know, they were fighting their battle with each other to sell me something, whereas this brand helped me. This brand made a difference. They carried me through. So you will get long-term value from what you do now, and that will carry you through Web3. And it's not going to be about how old your brand is. It's not going to be how big it is. It's going to be about how you build trust and engagement right now. That's the pressure that every marketeer is going to have to think about. It's not just what's happening now. It's where you're going to be in 5 years' time is defined by what you do now.
I think that's one of the final questions I want to ask you, because there's so much we spoke about today about this like video and I kind of like Web 2. I talk about Web 2, but I mean, let's be honest, like from what you're telling me, like for most people, the prevalent focus should be get a grip on, just video, like just start doing basic storytelling, like you said.
Oh my God.
Do you feel like the Web3 kind of chat, it, in many ways could damage a lot of people who, especially in finance, who haven't even got a basic understanding of what social media is? Or do you feel like this is going to almost, how in like certain countries, for example, in Africa, they skip landlines, went straight to mobile? Do you find that actually in many ways it's going to be that? Or do you think it has to be an evolution through these creatives to get to a point in which you can even dominate in Web3?
That's a very clever and insightful thought, that the Africa skipping a generation example. That's really interesting. I actually don't think that will happen, because I think the media changing from social to video to Web3, metaverse, I think the medium will change. Bit like the medium changes with music, vinyl, CD, cassette, whatever. So the medium will change. The delivery mediums will change, no question, in some shape or form. But what brands need to get their head around is the way they communicate. And that, we've already had the shift. Social, and you guys are preeminent in getting people to understand how social can be used. But effectively, what you are doing is all the time saying to people, be human, be engaging, be open. It's a conversation, and no matter how many times you say it, you still can't say it enough. And that's the most important thing. Whether you're doing that on Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, kind of doesn't matter. I mean, there are some nuances, but overall, it's about your mindset has to shift. And I think that what banks and financial institutions need to do is they've got their mindset has to change. That's the most important thing. And unfortunately, many institutions are still have so many baby boomers that they are dependent on for the wealth structure of their organization, that they desperately can't throw the baby out with the bathwater and lose that audience. That's what terrifies them. So they've got a whole pile of money over here that they don't want to lose and upset. And, oh my God, if we did videos, half our audience wouldn't look at the videos because, they can barely open an email type stuff. I mean, I'm exaggerating. So they're terrified, paralyzed by that. But at the same time, you've got the millennials and the Gen Z coming through saying, Jesus Christ, what you're doing over there is so old fashioned. You're not the institution for me. And so we're in a bit of a schizophrenic moment in time. The best institutions are finding ways to communicate to both. On Real Vision, for example, we have our audience is 1/3 boomer, 1/3 Gen X, 1/3 millennial. Very rare to have that kind of even split. I think CNBC and Bloomberg, their average audience age is 63 and 67. So banks are very similar. They're all paranoid and they're all worried about wealth transfer from the older generation to the younger generation. But that's not just about getting the money transferred over. It's about the mindset of the organization. And a lot of that is reflected in the way they communicate. So I think that's almost a bigger problem than, do we get into video? Do we get into podcasts? Do we get into the metaverse? They'll do none of that if they can't get their heads around how they need to speak to people.
Yeah. And I think it's a really nice final point. Shining through is authenticity, and the context can change, but the underlying principles remain the same. And I think that's exactly right. And
this is a very exciting time, James. You must be seeing it in your business. This is a super exciting time for content.
It is. Well, there's not enough. The demand cannot be reached. There's just this. It's just a speeding up, and there's people. People want more content, and it's like, okay, do we sit around a table and go, what are we going to do this week? This is the big campaign, and then a piece of news. I mean, a classic example was one of our clients created a video series. I don't know what it was. It was on some kind of fintech thing. Something happened. I think something happened, and the whole series is out of date. Yeah. So they scrapped the whole thing. So it's like this. I think you mentioned the schizophrenic. It is chaos. And I think that today we spoke about decentralization, and we're really big about empowering humans. And I think the point you're bringing into this is that ultimately you have to let go of the steering wheel slightly and sort of fall into the chaos and almost let this just kind of become way more flexible and way more relax, and just kind of don't think your brand is so.
We've done some films with clients on iPhones, filming it on an iPhone and getting it out, deliberately doing it on an iPhone because we wanted that kind of immediacy and urgency of something's happened. We just want to, the most important thing is that we get this out to you, and it creates a much more informal, relaxed, urgent style than going in studio. So. You've got all these factors are important, but as you say, I think it's a really good quote. Leaving the steering wheel a little bit and just going where the world is going, the audience are going.
I won't do that with my 7-month-old daughter when I'm driving back from. I will definitely do that, but that's a good point actually, and that's a serious point. At some point, I will be able to do that, and that reinforces the point we're making. Technology is just kind of catching up. Thank you so much, Damien, and I really appreciate you taking time. For those that want to connect to Damien, just please LinkedIn message him. And I really appreciate you coming on. And have a good afternoon, mate.
This is the event of the year in this space. I think you always have great speakers. You always pull out the really interesting points, and I'm very happy to be part of it. And good luck to you. It's great that you're doing this, because my God, somebody needs to be.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Makes it all worthwhile.
Sorry?
It makes it all worthwhile. I'll be here for 2 days doing live streams. I just won't stop.
All right, my friend. Well, good luck with it.
Thanks, Damien. Bye-bye. Okay.